Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we are going to talk about Franz Wagner's rookie max extension from last season finally kicking in and how that impacts the Orlando Magic moving forward, as well as a couple of the impacts of day one of free agency on the Orlando Magic, as they have probably done their one and only move outside of a potential trade here and there. So now they're pretty much set, but the dust has not settled. So we're going to talk about some of the teams that made a play on day one to elevate themselves, not just in the Eastern Conference, but to make themselves more dangerous in the championship picture as well. Let's get into it. The salary cap number for the 2025-2026 season was announced earlier on today with a raising of up to $154.6 million with a chance for 10% increases due to the new TV rights deal with NBC Sports. With that being the case, Franz Wagner, who is making 25% of the team's salary cap due to signing that rookie max extension, now has the official understanding of where his numbers are set going over the next 5 years, which he signed for starting last summer. And that makes him a player that is now in the pantheon of his own amongst Orlando Magic greats. Let me tell you how. Over the next 5 seasons, he's going to see significant raises starting at $38 million up to $41, $45, $48, and then in 2029, 2030, he will be making $52.5 million. Why is that so special? Besides the fact that it's generational wealth, Franz Wagner is now the first and only Orlando Magic in franchise history to make $50 million in a single season. In that 2029-2030 season, he will be making almost $53 million. He is in a special company of his own financially when it comes to the Orlando Magic, and also it puts him in a real interesting position because he has one of the richest contracts that will be handed out in Orlando Magic history. We'll see what Paulo Banchero ends up signing for probably sometime later on this summer. Be interesting to see how those numbers rival, but Franz Wagner is setting a precedent for an Orlando Magic franchise that clearly is trying to find new cornerstone pieces after having guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Tracy McGrady, Dwight Howard, different guys like that come through the pipeline and be real cornerstones for their franchise, but not have really any go-to guys in the post Orlando Magic Dwight Howard era outside of maybe when Victor Oladipo was there for a brief time period. And I don't even necessarily know if you can count that because Victor Oladipo's best seasons probably were more so done in Indiana than with the Magic. So they haven't had a cornerstone guy that they believe in to the extent to even be able to get to this kind of number paired with the league finances as well. But they haven't had a cornerstone guy that they would want to lean into on this kind of level in quite some time. So for Franz Wagner to be the guy that sets that bar, huge accomplishment for him. Huge accomplishment for the Orlando Magic to be able to kind of invest in a guy who long term will be a guy that they hope is a cornerstone to not just bringing success to their franchise, but obviously shooting for that championship. In terms of what the Orlando Magic were able to do on day one of free agency, they stepped in and got one of my top targets and my favorite backup point guard in the entire league, Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones comes in on a 1-year, $7 million rental, and he is the perfect backup point guard for this young Orlando Magic team as a guy who can be a table setter, and he could be a guy that adds three-point shooting to this roster, has the versatility offensively to play next to just about anybody in the backcourt for the Orlando Magic. And he brings a veteran leadership to our Orlando Magic team that when you look across the roster doesn't have too many guys that have real playoff experience and doesn't have too many guys that are in that backcourt in particularly that have real experience long term. I mean, Jace Richardson is going to be a rookie. Jalen Suggs is still in the early stages of his career where he hasn't even reached his prime yet. Desmond Bane is a little bit of an older player and has been battle tested in the postseason, but still not necessarily a guy that you would say has a whole ton of experience underneath of his belt. Anthony Black is still in a proven portion of his rookie contract. Like, this backcourt is not necessarily the most experience. So Tyus Jones comes in and brings a lot of that out the gate. He's a guy who I think is going to be really interchangeable, and we know that he's a guy that can step in when the starting point guard or starting two guard goes down with injury. He can step in, fill in a real way, and still allow the team to be successful, something that the Orlando Magic struggled with a lot when Jalen Suggs was out most of last season, where he only played a handful of games. This is assuring their point guard depth. It's adding more three-point shooting to them. It's bringing veteran leadership and winning mentality. And I think that Tyus Jones, of all the different options on the free agency market that could have been in discussion, obviously we talked about a handful of different people over the last few weeks, but Tyus Jones, I think, maybe wasn't the guy, but he was, in my opinion, the best option. Also, given the financial cap strap, or the, let's say, the lack of flexibility that the Orlando Magic have in terms of their finances after the Desmond Bane trade. So it was, I think I had said in a most recent episode that Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Tyus Jones, Ty Jerome, those were like the main interesting guys on the free agency poll that you would want to kind of make your top targets. So to be able to get Tyus Jones and get him on such a team-friendly contract, like 1 year, $7 million, big deal for the Orlando Magic to shore up that backcourt. And speaking of that backcourt, now I would say that the Orlando Magic have just about solidified themselves in terms of what they want to do this offseason. It wouldn't hurt for them to go after a backup power forward / center to kind of continue to add to that front court depth. Mainly in terms of in the form of like a rebounder / rim protector type. DeAndre Ayton recently was in negotiations with the Portland Trailblazers for a buyout. Could you potentially get him on a prove-it deal, 1 year, 2 year prove-it deal, as a guy who can be an enforcer on the glass, as a 15-10 guy who shot 54 to 56% from the field last season? That could be interesting. Like, DeAndre Ayton could be a really interesting athlete, real rangy guy who could be athletic around the rim, both as an offensive player and a defensive player. Not necessarily saying he's the perfect fit. He's probably rumored to teams like the New York Knicks and the Los Angeles Lakers, who need a center pretty bad. But the Orlando Magic could be a really good fit for him as another guy in the fray, as not only maybe a potential starting center, but even if he comes off the bench, could give you anywhere between 20 and 25 minutes a game of just real impact athleticism around the rim, as a lob threat, as a defender, shot blocker, the whole kind of thing. So, but in terms of the backcourt, I said it earlier, Tyus Jones, Jalen Suggs, you have Desmond Bane, obviously, Jace Richardson, Anthony Black. I mean, they have one of the strongest 5-man backcourt rotations in the entire NBA from a talent perspective, and they added significant three-point shooting across the board, where you could probably say that within that group, Anthony Black is probably the worst three-point shooter, but he may arguably be the best defender, if not Eaton, probably the second best defender, probably more so the second best defender, behind only Jalen Suggs within that group. So although he doesn't give you the stretch three-point ability that those other 4 guys do at that level, he probably is the second best defender of that group, which gives him significant upside if he is able to get into that 36 to 37% three-point shooting clip range next season. So their backcourt is really handled start to finish, where they're going to get a legitimate 48 minutes of real strong backcourt play from the point guard and shooting guard positions, of having consistent three-point shooting, real defensive identity no matter who the lead guard is, and the opportunity to continue to run things through Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner without being worried about guys not being able to operate off ball, because all 5 of these guys can operate without the ball in their heads and still shoot the ball at a high clip and operate in a way where they're just able to make the offense look a lot easier, especially in half-court settings, which is where the Orlando Magic struggled the most in, because outside of Paulo Banchero, they struggled to have a real self-shot creator. Now they have guys that can really slow the game down, make good decisions, make good reads. And I said this when I talked about how the Orlando Magic look like a team that's mimicking what the Oklahoma City Thunder have put together, or what a team like the Boston Celtics did in the past, of being able to add real three-point shooting and defense around these 2 ball-handling wings that can be all-star caliber on any given season. So with this backcourt being fully solidified, I mean, this team is in a really good spot right now. Where again, I think if they can just get one more big time center to add to their rotation, especially with the chances of Goga Batazde or Wendell Carter or Jonathan Isaac being moved, I think getting another high level center on a cheap, prove it deal could be really, really helpful for them. And I'd be interested to see if that's something that ends up rounding itself out within the next couple of days. But lastly, we're going to finish off with a team that I think had a really strong day one of free agency, and that is the Atlanta Hawks. And the Atlanta Hawks actually made two acquisitions that not only bolstered their roster, but actually hurt the Orlando Magic in the same process, because the Orlando Magic had these two guys on their target list, and that is Luke Kennard, knockdown three-point shooter, shoots about 37 to 38% on around 7 to 8 attempts per game, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who we literally just discussed on last episode, talking about how Nickeil Alexander-Walker would actually be a perfect puzzle piece fit for this Orlando Magic team, given that he's 6'5", has real ball handling chops, can create offense for himself as a guy who was known more as an offensive player coming out of Virginia Tech, and a dude who's built a defensive identity for himself where he could guard multiple positions and be a dude who can play off ball next to a handful of different point guard options that the Magic have, whether it's Jace Richardson, Jalen Suggs, or Anthony Black. He would fit in any iteration of that because he can be an offensive guy next to Anthony Black. He could be a defensive guy next to Jalen Suggs, and they just be a completely hounding defense in that backcourt. He could be an offensive guy next to Jalen Suggs. He could be a defensive assist next to a guy like Jace Richardson. And don't even get me started on the fact that he would fit really well duplicatively next to Desmond Bane, because they both really do a lot of the same things. I think Nickeil's a little bit better of a defender just based off his size, but they both do a lot of the same things. So those two in the backcourt would look amazing. But nope, he's an Atlanta Hawk, which fits really, really well for what they're trying to do, because they have the chance to go into next season where, I mean, they legitimately could have him either come off as their backup point guard, or he can start at the 2 next to Trae Young. You still have Dyson Daniels. You have Jalen Johnson. You have Onyeka Okongwu. Like, you still have Zachary Ricochet as well. Like, they have an interesting group now when you pair Luke Kennard and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. If those two guys coming off the bench, you still look at the rotation that they have. Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Zachary Ricochet. They just brought in, obviously, Luke Kennard, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You have Onyeka Okongwu. You drafted Asa Newell. If I didn't say Dyson Daniels already, that's another guy that's in the fray. I mean, you have a legitimate, 8 to 9 man rotation right there. And you do so in a way where you address backup point guard, which was desperately needed behind Trae Young, because their team seems to not be able to function properly without him on the floor offensively, mainly due to the fact that outside of Jalen Johnson, they don't have any real shot creators, and Jalen Johnson is going to be coming off an injury, so you have to take that into consideration. Then you have a dude like Luke Kennard, who again adds three-point shooting. Oh, I forgot to mention Kristaps Porzingis, who they obviously traded for, coming from the Boston Celtics as well. So yeah, they have a legitimate 9, maybe even 10-man rotation. And Luke Kennard and Kristaps Porzingis add real three-point shooting chops next to Trae Young. Also, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, like I mentioned beforehand, is no slouch as a guy who takes about 5 to 6 a game and shoots 37% from beyond the arc as well. This Orlando Magic team should be worried when we're talking about a team like the Atlanta Hawks, who clearly are mimicking what the Magic did with Desmond Bane in terms of going forward and understanding the big picture of this window that they have with the Eastern Conference looking the way it is going into next year. And the Atlanta Hawks are taking the message the same way the Magic sent it and saying, you know what, you're right. This year is a really good opportunity to go for the whole dang thing. We just saw the Indiana Pacers go to back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals, and this year they made the NBA Finals, made it to Game 7, and were a Tyrese Halliburton injury away from maybe being the team that actually raised the Larry O'Brien trophy, right? So why not at the Atlanta Hawks, who a few seasons ago were the iteration of the Indiana Pacers, where they had went on this historic run in the Eastern Conference, granted more injured and were in situations where things were a lot more favorable to them, as opposed to the Indiana Pacers, who significantly overachieved given the matchups they had. But this Atlanta Hawks team knows that they've had the capability in the past with Trae Young as the lead guard to make a Eastern Conference Finals. And now they're building around Trae Young once again in a way to really maximize an opportunity where they could be a team representing the East just this upcoming year with a roster that really is well filled out next to Trae Young. There's real three-point shooting chops next to him now that he's never had in terms of opening the floor up much more. He's got a lot more athleticism around him, a lot more defensive acumen around him. And this team could be really, really special next season. I don't know if they're going to be better than the Orlando Magic, and right now I would not predict that. I don't think the Atlanta Hawks are better than the Orlando Magic on paper right now. I would still take the Orlando Magic upside-wise going into next season, but the Atlanta Hawks took two of the Magic's biggest targets off the table, acquired both of them, and now have shored up a roster that goes about 10 deep, where they have real upside across the board. You guys let me know in the comment section whether or not you guys believe the Atlanta Hawks have usurped the Orlando Magic in terms of a top 4 ranking, or if you think the Orlando Magic still rank above the Atlanta Hawks coming out of day 1 of free agency. It'll be interesting to see what you guys say in the comment section down below. But until next episode, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content and other coverage around the league that impacts the Magic on a nightly and season-to-season basis. But until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.